Agent Morris with the NSA.
We have identified some very, very interesting anomalous type of aircraft.
The traffic is quite luminous and is exhibiting some non-ballistic motion, over.
Move very rapidly at any speed or whether any direction it wanted to go. Fly could change and go to the right or the left or go crossways without hesitating a bit.
What do you think it was?
Well, if they call it a flying saucer, that's what it is.
EWA 517, do you want to report a UFO? Over. Negative. We don't want to report.
Look, it wasn't my worst Wednesday night.
Good evening, everybody. This is Smiles Lewis, and you are tuned in to another live edition of Anomaly Now, straight out of Austin, Texas. It is Wednesday, August 23rd, 2023. 8:23:23 to us Americans, North Americans. Yeah, so this is the weekly live news roundup show for the 501c3 nonprofit Anomaly Archives, aka Scientific Anomaly Institute. You can switch those around, whichever's aka of the other. And we are a community-oriented nonprofit charitable organization whose mission and goal are the preservation of anomalous materials related to anomalous phenomena, whether that be cryptozoology, the study of Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, out-of-place animals, or previously believed to be extinct animals, that sort of thing, all the way to ufology, UAPology, unidentified aerial anomalous flying saucers. And all points in between: paranormal, parapsychological, crop circles, consciousness, ESP, ghosts, hauntings, the whole enchilada. Thank you for joining me. You, if aren't words, are trying to express something. The website, of course, is Anomaly Archives, ANOMALY archives.org. You can find links to our news aggregator, flipboard.com, there, as well as links to past shows of this series, as well as past lectures and events, as well as online catalogs of our collections, which currently are still in storage, but we are still in search of, like that classic 70s paranormal anomalistic show hosted by Leonard Nimoy. We are still in search of a new location. So going to be a little bit different here. For those of you who are familiar, you have probably already been to our website, as I mentioned. And of course, there is the Flipboard that I mentioned, which is over. Oh, that is not what I meant to do. Okay, let me try that again. Yes, so our website is anomalyarchives.org, and our Flipboard is the aggregator for our news. You can see the news feed over on the website. There's always a ton of stuff to read and learn about all these different subjects over there as it loads slowly. Using up all the bandwidth tonight. But I did want to talk about the passing of some important individuals. This journalist, Lee Speigel, much beloved in the UFO community, has been writing on the subject for a very long time. He passed away recently and will be sorely missed. I really always enjoyed whenever I saw his byline, reading his material. He was, like so few out there in the UFO community, a level head. It seemed to my aesthetic, somebody who had a real interest and belief that there is something important going on, and he wanted to report on it as a legitimate journalist. But what's really hit me a little harder this week was the passing of my friend and fellow researcher, David Perkins. David and he says that we met at a convention over a table where I guess he was selling books. At least that was his memory of it. But we had started corresponding back in the 90s during the publishing of the journal, the zine that I did, ELF, Elf Infested Spaces, Journal of Possible Paradigms. And I quickly realized that he had ideas that I very much was in sync with. And he was one of the few thinkers out there who had some very similar ideas to me, and my ideas were absolutely shaped by his. And David was a commentator on the Southwest and lived out in New Mexico. And I was honored to have a really wonderful discussion with him back in late 2020 when we were doing the 6-week-long, every Saturday, 8 to 10 hours every Saturday for 6 weeks, the emergency streamathon fundraiser for the Anomaly Archives. And he and I did a discussion called UFOs, Cattle Mutilations, and the Gaian Mind. And it's this Gaian idea that was what he and I most were simpatico with, as well as just accepting a lot of the same types of hypotheses, wild as they were. He was really convinced that there was no simple human explanation for what was going on with the cattle mutilations. And he felt, like so many of us, some of us, that there really seemed like there could be a theory of everything, a big toe theory, TOE theory of everything that would encompass all the strange mystery phenomena, the cryptid sightings, the paranormal apparition sightings, and UFO close encounters and sightings, but specifically the cattle mutilations. I'll probably try in the show notes for this episode to include some of the great interviews that David did over the years. There's at least one video of him giving a presentation online that you can actually access, I think, at this page of ours at anomalyarchives.org/collections/file/Perkins-David. I forget when this particular one was, but he was the founder and staff writer for Spirit Magazine. He was an active paranormal researcher for over 25 years. This is a very old, dated bio, but anyway, yeah, very sad to find out of his passing. I knew he was in ill health, but he was still remaining active, at least communicating with all of us who found his friendship so fond. And I did want to go ahead and play a couple of clips from the discussion that he and I had. And I just have to say, I did take some criticism for this discussion of ours by at least one person. And I think you can see the comment there over on YouTube. But their comment was, I was just rambling and talking way too fast, and there wasn't enough David talking. So I'm just going to play some clips of David talking. And the reason for my talking so fast in that video was I was just so excited to be having the conversation with him. And I knew there was so much ground to cover, and I really wanted to try to throw all this stuff out there with him and get a collaborative response. But let me pull this. And so this first clip, each of these clips is about 5 minutes or 5.5. This first clip is David talking about, I had just talked about Thomas Bearden, a kind of famous, infamous UFO researcher, frontier physics guy, who also was hardcore anti-Soviet Union, anti-Russia. And that informed kind of his ideas. But he was one of many who talked about this idea of a tulpa, this idea of a physicalized thought form. and except that he was coming at it from scalar wave psychotronic technology, and but he had done a famous book called The Excalibur Briefing, and I had been showing some slides about that, and so David chimed in with that. He also shares with us an interesting sidebar story about his meeting the Dalai Lama and trying to explore with one of his entourage this allegedly Tibetan idea of the tulpa. We'll see where that goes.
Well, I'm glad you put that up there. I was going to talk about him a little bit. I had met him back in the day because I used to go to Tesla conferences, and that's where I met him because he was a big Tesla guy. But I got to talk to him for a while about it. And I said, well, this is where the idea of tulpas comes in.
Yes.
For a while, that was kind of like the word that we use for these so-called manifestations. And I'm glad you are the first one to use that word because it's a very key word in this business right now. But talking to him, I said, I asked the obvious question. Okay, so the collective unconscious, it pushes down through those layers showed in that chart. And it's the collection point for human anxiety and fearfulness, I guess. In our case, it was our fear of the Russians. And that pushes out some other symbol up this other pneumatic tube of psychisms, and it comes out as a cattle mutilation, and that it's basically a warning that they're out to the cow represents, say, the motherland and the milk and the pleasant part of feeding America, and that it's our lifeblood. It's the cow, after all. So I said, well, there's got to be, what is the actual physical mechanism of this tulpoidal entity? He says, there is no mechanism. It's instantaneous. There is no mechanism. And I was like, oh, okay. He said, well, I described it as like, you mean the matter, the atoms in the cow and everything just rearranges itself instantaneously into what we call a cattle mutilation? He went, yeah. I went, whoa, okay. Now that's a huge leap. That is a huge leap. But just on the subject of tulpas, excuse me, I had the occasion to meet the Dalai Lama one time, and it's really weird because I was introduced to him and shook his hand, and we looked each other in the eye, and he just started laughing hysterically. And I didn't know if he was laughing at me or what. And then I started laughing hysterically. And then all the monks started laughing hysterically. And we just stood there, I don't know, for 2 or 3 minutes just laughing hysterically. And then we finally just said, nice to meet you. And I walked off. I never quite understood what that was about. I thought it was good. But in the course of that, I met one of the top monks, his right-hand man, really. And I asked him, what's the story on the tulpas? Because this is more or less a Tibetan concept from the works of Alexander David Neal in 1930s in Tibet. And she describes having learned how to create a tulpa, consciously create this entity, which is a fat little monk that she created, who carried her stuff through the mountains. And eventually, it was great because he was really helpful, but then it started developing a mind of its own. Yeah. And then it became troublesome and quarrelsome. And finally, she had to mentally disperse it. And so this is apocryphal at best. But I asked the monk, I said, what's the story on the tulpas? And he went, what? I said, the tulpas, the entities that you guys create that, do these things. He said, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, oh, come on. I mean, this is a Tibetan thing. You've never heard of a tulpa, anything called a tulpa? Nope. So whether it's just a closely guarded secret, and he just didn't want somebody like a punk like me inquiring about such a thing, could well be. So they didn't really answer anything. But the key part of the Alexander David Neal thing was that the thing develops a mind and a life of its own and has a physical presence. So it may carry over. It's certainly something that I consider, that somehow these manifestations do maybe develop a life and mind of their own and intelligence of their own, independent of us and or Gaian consciousness.
Well, and so, yeah, that was a clip from the 2020 Streamathon fundraiser where David and I had a really great discussion. And as I was saying, I was just so excited, just going crazy between segments, and then I'd let him talk, which is really why we were there. But I couldn't contain my enthusiasm. And he seemed to really enjoy the whole thing. And we talked later how much he enjoyed it. So one more clip, and this is, again, just touches on the Gaian UFO hypothesis that we were really focusing on. And I think it's a great discussion. I would recommend folks check it out, the whole thing. But here is another clip.
It's that. There is that. Well, it's, boy, you hit them all. You hit them all right there. The one that early on, though, just to clarify a little bit, I had my evolutionary imperative theory. This was early 80s also. And I got really into the study of memes and how memes move culture and move belief systems. So not only could we be whatever human hierarchies might want to manipulate the belief system, Gaia itself might want to manipulate the belief system through the memes, which the UFO and the cattle mutilation are forever wedded. We'll never entirely separate them. But I'm just thinking, like, locally, the manifestations of these memes. First of all, Chris O'Brien and I collect these imagery that's used in advertising, and you see it everywhere, of a cow being sucked up into a UFO in a beam of light. And it's just, we've got hundreds of them now. They just use them for everything. And the one that really tickled me was the Albuquerque, the parade of lights that they have every year. And the main attraction was the big display they had, and it was a flying saucer sucking a cow up in a beam of light. And then it said, "Fun for the whole family." And I'm going like, wow, you realize what's going to happen to that cow. It's going to end up back on the ground mutilated. But no, it's just fun. It's going up in the UFO. What the heck? And then, somebody in this state took the time to go and stencil a UFO. Every one of those cow signs, those yellow cow road signs, they stenciled a beam of light and a cow being sucked up into a UFO. That cow being sucked up. And it's hundreds of them. Hundreds, miles and miles and miles. Who took the time to do that and why? But I don't know. But the idea being that we are, it's like Terence McKenna said, the great goal of human history is to become a space-faring civilization, so that we are preparing ourselves, as you say, to either contact eventually these entities that we're contacting in some mode, energetic mode at this point, or physically contact them or whatever. But as you were saying earlier, we need to believe a little, but and we also have to, as a society, be consolidated enough, assuming we're going to leave the planet in metallic craft and actually fly to Mars and elsewhere. We need a pretty organized society to gather the resources and impetus and finances and whatnot to actually make that happen. And to do that, you have to juice it with a belief system that we're going to find life over there. We're going to find other intelligence in the universe. We're going to go out and explore the universe and colonize it like Star Trek. And we're going to have fist fights on the bridge of the Enterprise with Captain Kirk and the aliens. I mean, so I don't know. Science fiction, all of that gets thrown in there and develops these what I call meme plexes, which gently nudge the society along in cultural directions, which could be a biological survival strategy of sorts, even if it's coming from an unconscious place, our own unconscious, collective unconscious, or the planet saying, we got to get off this planet. Eventually, now we know it will be destroyed. We can't put all our DNA eggs in one basket. We've got to spread it out. Gaia may be thinking, if Gaia indeed thinks that way, but the big debate is still in Gaia. They had Lovelock had to tone it down. He said, okay, it's a provisional theory. I in no way intended it to be taken as a sentient being or having an intelligence of its own. It's like, okay. That's because he got attacked from the right, I guess you'd call it, in the scientific community, saying it was environmental Satanism and trying to establish a new religion and just all kinds of nonsense. It's a teleological substitute for Christianity or something. So he had a lot of blowback on it, so he had to back off that position. But I'm not backing off. I think all of that is true. But I got nothing to lose at this point. He's 100 years old. He doesn't have much to lose. So I think he had it right the first time. In fact, he had to tone it down. Now it's called Earth System Science, and it's taught in the universities. And they've tried to get rid of the word Gaia because it's a little too mystical. And we can live with that word, I suppose, although I don't think of my research as being mystical, oddly enough. In fact, I get criticized for reductionism and scientism by even trying to figure it out. I'm taking enchantment out of the world, right?
Well, so yeah, that was David Perkins, and so many folks have chimed in about how sad they are, of course, and how they were all recently in communication with him. So I think he was actively talking to friends and fellow researchers up until the end. I'm also happy to know, at the end of that discussion, he made a plea and a pledge to support the Anomaly Archives, and again to try to, as he said, try to prevent these massive collections that people acquire from going into dumpsters. And I'm glad to hear that it appears he has ensured that his legacy and his very voluminous library are going to be preserved at the National UFO Historical Records Center, organized by David Marler over there in New Mexico. So meanwhile, good friend Miguel Romero, Red Pill Junkie at the Daily Grail, has written a nice farewell to both Lee Speigel and David Perkins that you can read over there at dailygrail.com. And also, of course, Loren Coleman of the International Cryptozoology Museum has written an obit for David Perkins. Fortean and Mutology researcher David Perkins has passed. And there's a nice scan of Altered Stakes. Get it? Colloquium on the cattle mutilation question. Lots of great information here from Loren that he's collected about David's reflection on the passing of his other contemporaries. And there's, of course, that picture from the discussion I was just playing clips of. And some of the other of the Three Musketeers are these early cattle mutilation researchers that David was a part of, and this farewell that David wrote for his friends back in 2015. We'll have links to all of this in the show notes for tonight's show, of course. And Godspeed, David. Meanwhile, tons of other stuff to briefly touch on. Not much time to touch on it, but we'll see where we can get with these news links. Of course, we had been talking about the recent thehill.com. I believe they're actually connected to News Nation. So this is a two-channel front of UAP UFO coverage. And they had been planning this multi-hour event back Thursday. And it did go off pretty much without a hitch. They had a pre-recorded interview with Representative Tim Burchett, and they also talked to Ryan Graves, Rep. Anna Paulina, and others. But of course, for my money, the best part was the very end, where they had like about a 12-minute conversation with Pennsylvania State University professor Greg Agigian, who is a historian who is writing a new history book on the UFO phenomena, and that's worth your while. So you can go online, you can watch these on YouTube. The video is actually here. That I believe that's the whole multiple hour event, but they've also broken up the interviews into individual pieces available through their YouTube channel. That's fun to maybe take a look at. Meanwhile, when I was at the SCU conference virtually back in July, there was a presentation I missed the beginning of called "A Very Large UAP Crosses the North Pacific, Observed by 5 Pilots," with 2 photos and a video. By the time I tuned in, I was getting texts from folks who were like, "This is just another Starlink flare misidentification," and this astronomer, whose name I am just not, Richard E. Griffiths, University of Hawaii, Hilo, physics and astronomy affiliated professor. And, I found it to be a perfectly fine presentation, but yeah, I was less than impressed with the images and video once I did see them. But lo and behold, of course, Mick West, that's the wrong clip there. Yeah, so Mick West has used the available tools and seems to have again come up with a probable explanation of this sighting as a Starlink flare, one of the Musk satellites that when they get launched, they go in a little pearl chain, and then as they eventually get into their orbits, they're there and they reflect light, and they can look strange to people from a distance. Now, whether or not you accept this is up to you, but it seems like a perfectly good explanation to me. Now, a few days ago, a friend sent me a link saying, "Hey, Brian Graves has posted some great UFO exciting data, and including photos and video, on his Twitter channel, his X channel." And yep, there it is. And surprise, surprise, yet again, Mick West is claiming that this is just misidentifications of the Starlink flaring from the sun. And I must say, I think he's got the explanation right. And I think, as he says politely in the video, Ryan and others need to do better at using the available tools and getting these easily identifiable UFOs, these IFOs, out of the data pool. And it goes to something I've said for a long time when people are like, "Hey, what's that weird light in the sky?" And I'm like, "Well, what's weird about it? Is it doing something that a normal aircraft can't do? Is it, just that you're not sure what it is?" Obviously, that constitutes a UFO if you don't know what it is. But I'm so disinterested in lights in the sky, LITS, that I'm just like, unless it's close enough to like discern what possibly structure, or it's doing something that you absolutely, know that a traditional aircraft can do, then I'm just not that interested in it. And that's so much of these sightings. I mean, I know that there are plenty of sightings that don't fit that bill, but anyway, I do think there does seem to be that antagonism being set up there between the skeptics and the believers again, as there always has been, always will be. And speaking of skeptics, one who we had on a few weeks ago with Chris Rutkowski is Kurt Collins, who runs the Saucers That Time Forgot website, as well as blueblurrylines.com. And lo and behold, Kurt did a excellent timeline on one of my favorite subjects, and that is this idea of an alien attack or mass UFO sighting somehow uniting humanity against a common foe. And of course, in the conspiracy world, this has long been used as a the idea that there will be a fake staged faux FAUX false flag alien invasion. There's talk of the alleged Project Bluebeam, this idea of being able to fake gods and angels and aliens in the sky with holograms or psychotronic mind control technology or combination thereof, or all the different scenarios that people have envisioned. Well, this is a great timeline. He's been adding even more stuff to it. And of course, this is all based on the adage, as he quotes here, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." And he really goes back quite a ways. 1897, War of the Worlds, 1897, of course, H.G. Wells. But he's got a great list here that's still growing. And there's even several that I was unaware of. Of course, if you've read my essay in UFOs Reframing the Debate, this is one of the areas I touch on and go into some detail. Of course, have to invoke the classic Ronald Reagan on multiple occasions talking about, I imagine that if there was some external outside force or threat that we would all come together when speaking to the United Nations. But he said he used that whole speech more or less at least 3 times, I believe, twice at the United Nations and once or twice at like school assemblies. And we're not even talking about like colleges that I'm aware of, but check that out. That's over at The Saucers That Time Forgot.blogspot.com. And we'll, of course, have a link to it in the show notes. Meanwhile, I guess that does it for that tab. Oh, as I expected, the ads. Hold on, folks. Maybe just wanted to touch on some, it's probably not even going to show it anymore, cryptozoology related stuff here in Texas, in case you hadn't heard. Let's see if this is gonna, I haven't switched it over because you don't need to see this ad. Come on. Sorry, folks. 30 seconds. So over at kens5.com is this report. Strange sighting, Hill Country Village baffled by mysterious creature. Wild animals spotted at a Northside home on Tuesday. The property owner is now asking the public to help identify it. I don't know if we're actually going to be able to play this clip. Probably not. Nope, does not look like that's going to work. Well, anyway, here's the webpage, Kens5. I think they have the photos down here. Yeah, look at this thing. So all kinds of responses from folks about what this looks like. Of course, the first thing that crossed my mind, if you've been tracking the quote unquote chupacabras reports here in Texas for the last decade or so, coyotes with mange is the main thing. But this does look like a kind of a strange animal, even though at the same time it's clearly canine looking. But the woman whose backyard this was admits they're not very good pictures. So, but it's anytime something like this happens, folks get all Twitter and interested. And meanwhile, this one is also likely not going to show the video. Local fishing charter crew sees a whale of a sight off the Port Aransas coast. They saw a whale shark and got video footage of it, which of course I am not going to be able to show there. But man, again, growing up as a kid, my cryptozoology interest was definitely centered around known real animals that were just rare or misperceived as dangerous. The whale shark being a good example of that. Oh, maybe we can get some of this. Hold on.
Large dark spots swimming below them in the water. The two say it took them a second to figure out what it was, and then they realized a whale shark was swimming just below them.
Now, the team grabbed their cameras and captured some incredible video. There it is right there. Whale sharks, by the way. Yeah, most commonly found off the coasts of, get this, Mexico, Belize, Thailand, South America.
Not Texas. Well, I guess Gulf of Mexico. Mexico, right? There we go. Before we wrap up here, there was real quickly, let's see if I can get this. There are some interesting events coming up, some of which are free. You may want to check out Anomicon, being put on by Ryan Sprague. This one's coming up on September 1st and 2nd and is going to be free to watch through YouTube. That's available to find more information about over at anomicon.com. There is a huge lineup of folks, many of which I'm sure you are familiar with. You might want to check that one out. There's good friends, Miguel, Joshua, Paul, so many others. And I have no doubt that this is going to be a fun, interesting time. And then good friends Adam Sane are having their hybrid event live and in person, as well as streaming on the internet. Strange Realities 2023. And this is happening at a place called Sir Nashville and online. And you can find out more about that at strangerealitiesconference.com. And this is, I think, their third such event, and I'm sure it's going to be another winner. I really hope I can make it to one of these days. Always enjoy watching the replay though. And if you can make it over to Belgium, First International Non-Local and Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Symposium in UAPS, IN-UAPS. This one's coming up in early November 2023, November 4th and 5th. And you can find this one. I believe, I believe they have a virtual version as well. I think several of these people are not going to be there. I'm a little disappointed to see Sean, or not, that's not Sean David Morton, Felon. Courtney Brown, remote viewer Courtney Brown. He's been making the rounds still. I just have feelings about that and his connection to the Hale Bop Heaven's Gate debacle, mass suicide, but not making any accusations there. No. So, meanwhile, if you are so inclined, of course, I last episode or so mentioned my strange appearance in the New York Times op-ed written by researcher Annie Kelly. Even conspiracy theorists are alarmed by what they've seen. This, of course, over at NewYorkTimes.com. And it is literally using me as a device to talk about this research project that is called Everything is Connected, the Internet and Conspiracy. I've gotten nothing but really good positive responses from people who've read the article. And lo and behold, a few days ago, a friend was driving back from out of state to Austin. And as they were passing through Dallas, they decided to try to tune into one of the radio shows that they like to listen to called Think out of KERA in Dallas. And this friend suddenly heard them talking about Stephen Miles Lewis, me. And of course, conspiracy theory in general. And so you can go here and you can listen to this interview with Annie Kelly talking about her research, and she did a great job. And she thankfully tried to redirect the more personal questioning away from being about me and about the project and about the nature of conspiracy theories and her research into it. And I got to say again, I think she did a great job. I think she really helps diffuse some of the stigma surrounding the pejorative of conspiracy theorist, while trying to understand the nature of people who believe these things, like myself. So, well, I guess that will do it for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time to tune in live. But if you aren't tuning in live, or you can always subscribe and listen to this later. You can watch the videos via anomalyarchives.org. You can go, there's a directory there of all the Anomaly-NOW shows that have ever happened, with the links to the YouTube video archive, as well as the more recent episodes have their own individual pages over there at anomalyarchives.org, where we put the links to the show note links. And we try to put them into also the YouTube archive version. And the audio version gets posted usually within 24 to 36 or 48 hours after tonight's live Wednesday night show. And if you've paid attention, you might hear a little bit better audio on that, but you don't get to see any of the video. But hey, that's not such a big deal. Anyway, you can go to anomalyarchives.org and find all the links to that. So thank you for joining us, everybody, and good night.